Hey everybody, Jane here, and I am doing my mid-month wrap-up for July 2019. So far in the month, I have read 5 books. Well, I read 4 and I DNF'd 1, but I got pretty far into it before I DNF'd it. So, I wanted to talk about these now because I figure that I'm going to read several more books. I have at least 4 more planned reads and probably going to be quite a few more than that. So, wanted to get this out of the way so that my end of the month wrap up is not huge and crazy and overwhelming. So, the first book I want to talk about is my DNF. Now, this was kind of an unusual circumstance for me. This is Carnegie Hill by Jonathan Vatner, and I won this from a Goodreads giveaway. This book was just not for me, but it's a really good book. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, like why did you stop reading it and why is it not for you if it's a really good book? I think this book is great and I think a lot of people will really enjoy it. There were just a couple things that I wasn't really jiving with, but I don't want anybody to think that this isn't worth a try because it's very funny and it has a lot of commentary on wealth, and there's a lot of rich people being awful. So anyway, let me start with what this book is about. This is about a girl named Pepper, and she is recently engaged to this guy, and she's moved in with him in this really wealthy apartment building. So she is asked to join, like, I think it's a co-op. It's the people who are in charge of making decisions for the complex, and she is the daughter of somebody who's important. somebody important and powerful. They brought her into the co-op because they want her name and they want it to seem like they have this important person's daughter involved and hope to get new residents. Pepper is in her 30s and she's the youngest member of this board. And also, she figures out pretty quickly that she doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff happening on this board, and that most of the people on the board are actually pretty terrible people that she doesn't really want much to do with. So, let me tell you what I loved about this book. Obviously, it is funny, it's interesting, and I really enjoyed Pepper in the beginning. There is actually, I highlighted it, when we first meet her, it says, Pepper had been dressing up a lot lately. It was a shortcut to looking mature, even if she didn't feel that way. Despite being on the verge of 33, she still felt like a teenager on the inside. And it goes on to kind of say because she's never had a real official job, she's not married, she doesn't have kids, she still feels very young. And I really could relate to that because I'm 35 and I still feel like a teenager sometimes. I don't know that that ever goes away. I don't know that I want it to go away because then I'm afraid I'll feel old. But so I really could relate to her, and I really liked that about her in the beginning, that she wasn't taking herself too seriously. She didn't feel like a grown-up, and she felt a little bit out of her league. However, as the book goes on, she really has been kind of sheltered. There is a scene later where she is trying to do some laundry, and apparently we've never done laundry before, and we're 34, and the maid usually or 30, however much she said, and the maid usually does it, and the maid wasn't able to do it on that day, and so funnies ensue. Well, conversations ensue, and it was interesting. So there was a lot I liked, but as I got deeper into it, I started to feel really frustrated with the decisions that Pepper was making. It's really well explained why she makes those decisions, and I didn't feel like she was making decisions that were wrong for her. I got why she did it, she was really irritating me. Another thing is the rich people were just awful. There's really no redeemable characters in this, at least as far as I got that I could tell. And even Pepper herself can be really awful. Like, I kind of hoped when we were going in here that she was like a sweet, naive girl who's suddenly around all these rich people who are cutthroat and evil. But that's not really what we get. She's not really much better than them. She is having some personal problems. Her parents have told her that they don't like her fiance, and that if she gets married as quickly as she would like to get married. They're not going to be coming to the wedding, so there's some personal drama going on with her and her parents are kind of an odd situation to begin with. Anyway, so a lot of that stuff starts happening. And once we got into like the thick of the plot and Pepper started making some choices, I just felt like I couldn't really root for her anymore, and I was getting frustrated with things. I did like that she was very much, as far as the meetings, trying to get more diversity. She's got a good heart. She's got good ideas. And she's very much about standing up against the man. So I did love all those things about her, but some of the decisions she made, I really couldn't get on board with. The other thing, and the main reason that I DNF'd this, and this is so hard to explain because it's really weird, but the sexuality in this novel bothered me. And this, I can't really tell you why, because there was no blatant sex scenes. It's not erotica or anything like that. But like, we get a couple neighbors' perspectives, and then one neighbor is telling us about his erection, and another neighbor is complaining because her husband doesn't want to sleep with her. And then we have a scene with Pepper and her fiance where they're doing stuff and she's questioning his motives behind it, I guess. It made me uncomfortable the way that the sexuality was dealt with in this novel. And because that was going on, and because I was already starting to get really frustrated with Pepper, I thought, I feel like this book is gonna probably not be for me. And because I don't want to discourage anybody from reading it, because I think it's for a lot of people, just not me, I chose, and because it was making me uncomfortable, I chose not to continue. So that was Carnegie Hill. If you don't mind a little bit more sexual innuendo, if you don't mind kind of an awful main character, she's not awful like everybody else, but she's just not as sympathetic as I wanted her to be. This has some good moments, it has some good thoughts, it has some good things it says about wealthy rich people. But it wasn't for me. So, yeah, thank the author for sending it to me. I did get fairly far into it, but I just couldn't quite finish it. All right, the next book was a manga, Children of the Whales. This is about a child who has some magical powers, and he lives on this ship thing. He documents everything. So he writes down everything, and people think he's kind of weird because of that. And at some point they go exploring and realize that there's other life outside of their ship. And they kind of suspected that, but they've never met anybody. And they meet somebody from the outside and learn stuff. I don't want to say too much more because it gets kind of crazy after that. This book was a 3 out of 5 for me. Now this is only I haven't read too many manga, so I'm not sure if that was part of the issue, but I had a real hard time keeping track of which characters were which. And in general, the plot kind of threw me. I didn't really understand what was going on, especially by the end of it. Everything was kind of crazy, and it ended, I guess, on a cliffhanger maybe, and I just wasn't on board with the cliffhanger. I wanted to really love this, and it's interesting because the basic plot, I think, is going to be, oh, why have we been on the ship? Why haven't the elders told us why we're here? What do these outsiders potentially know that we don't? Maybe it's got a little bit of a dystopian vibe to me, but I don't know that I'm going to continue. I'm putting that on a maybe, I'm not feeling it right now, but if I ever decide to pick it up, possibly, but I wasn't loving it. I was confused and I didn't like it. So those were the only 2 books that I didn't love so much so far this month. Everything else was a 4 and a 5. So the next 3 books I am going to talk about, but I'm going to be kind of brief because I'm going to be doing full reviews on them. The first one of those is Bird Box. For the few people in the world who don't know, This book is about a woman named Mallory, and she is living in a world where there are monsters. And if you look at the monster, you go crazy and kill everybody around you and kill yourself. So she has to wear a blindfold, and she is by herself with 2 children, and she has decided that it is time that they go to this place that they believe will be safe. However, she has to boat on the river with a blindfold with these 2 kids. I was not sure what I was going to think about this, but I freaking loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and I thought it was awesome. Some of the things that really worked for me is the world is very scary, and it's well done. I thought it was really well done, and I was interested in everything they were trying to do. There are some great quotes, which I'm going to be talking about in my review. Now, I don't annotate actually because this is a library book, so I'll take those out. But I did want to mention a couple quotes because they were just awesome in the way that Mallory sees the world, and particularly like what her goals are, especially her view as a mother to these children. I had heard a couple people say they didn't love the ending. I didn't have a problem with the ending. I thought it was as closed as you could expect it to be based on what kind of book this is. And the other thing that maybe wasn't as great as it could have been, and it's a minor complaint, is we don't really ever learn as much as I would have liked to learn about the monsters. So, but again, because the way the story's told, you really can't. So I don't necessarily see that as a complaint. If you enjoy horror stories, this was so good. I have heard that the Netflix show is a bit different. I haven't watched it yet, but especially the character of Mallory, from what people were telling me, seems different. I'm curious and I'm hoping to watch it and see, but the book, at least, was excellent. My next 4-star, Murder on Trinity Place. All right, you guys, if you've been watching me, you know that Victoria Thompson is one of my favorites, and you'll also know that I've been struggling with this series. This is book 23, I think, in the series, and I've read every single one, but the last several were starting to not work for me, and I was debating whether I wanted to continue the series. This book got back to all the wonderful goodness of the series, and I am so glad I continued. So this series, in general, is about a man named Frank and a girl named Sarah. They live in the 1900s, and they solve murders. I don't want to give too much away because, again, 23 books in the series, but into the series. So anyway, a neighbor is murdered. Or a neighbor's family member, I guess, to be more accurate, is murdered. And they are enlisted by this family member to find out who murdered this person. I did not guess the murderer until fairly deep in the story, which is pretty rare for me with these. I usually am getting pretty good at it. This has a lot to do with a real life event, which is one of the things I love about these books. There were some milk war stuff going on. So basically, some of the farmers who were producing milk, the dairy farmers, they were feeding their cows swill, which is, my understanding, like runoff from alcohol. Anyway, and it was making people really sick, like especially kids. We get a quote in here from Sarah, who is a midwife, that like half of the children in New York are dying because of this swill milk. It's either killing them because it's toxic or it's weakening their immune system. So the farmer who died, the family member who died, was a farmer, and we learn he was not using swill milk, and he was revealing some of the farms that did. And so there's a question of like, is that why the murder's happening, or was there another motive? And I love that Victoria Thompson does that in her world. She takes real life historical events and uses that to kind of shape the mystery. Another thing that this book did well that the last couple hadn't done so well. In the past few, I feel like there's been a lot of repetition. Everybody kind of sits around and goes, what do we know? What have we learned? And this one was a very minimal amount of that. People have mentioned in past reviews that I've read that seems to be like a trend in these books. Up until the last few, I wasn't bothered by it. I didn't necessarily see it, but the last few, it did feel like there was a lot of sitting around going, here's the clues we have. The other thing that I really loved about this book, and that had been kind of a struggle with the last few, there are two secondary characters. A guy who works with Frank and Sarah's, a lady who works for Sarah. And they had gotten involved in the last few books in the mysteries, and I wasn't loving that because I felt like they were kind of taking over the story, and I just didn't like them as much as I liked Frank and Sarah. Like, I saw why the author was trying to do that, because Frank and Sarah have really awesome character arcs, and this is a very character-based series. Like, the murders are okay, but it's the characters I come back for. And Sarah and Frank have really gone through a lot of their character arcs. It's 23 books in. And so I feel like they were trying to bring in some fresh stories, but I just didn't like those characters as well. So in this book, they're there, they help investigate, but they're very much back to secondary character status, and I was cool with that. So there was, like, I wanted a certain thing to happen, and I was like, oh, if that thing happens, I'm gonna keep reading. Because there is, like, one more huge potential story arc in the Frank and Sarah storyline. I can't give it away without spoiling it, but there was one more thing that I was like, oh, if that happens, I'll keep reading. I'm gonna keep reading if she can keep giving me this quality, even if the thing I kind of want to happen doesn't happen. So we'll see, but my faith is renewed. I'm excited for the next book. This is everything I want in a Gaslight mystery. And if you enjoy historical mysteries, this is an amazing series. It's amazing. It feels a little bit like cozy mystery, but it's not quite a cozy, because Frank, when we start the book, you know, he's a policeman, and there's a little bit of police procedural, but it's not like hardcore police. It's such a good mix, and so much about the time period, and such good characters, and very character driven, and I love these. And everybody who loves historical mystery should give them a try. First book, a little bit of warning on the content. There's some content I wasn't quite ready for. The content in the very first book is a little bit. So just be warned, some potentially stuff you might be uncomfortable with in the first book. Other than that, though, they don't necessarily deal with such topics. I can't say it without spoiling it, okay? But yeah, the first book is a little bit rough to read because of the content, not because of poor writing. So just be warned. If you read the first book and go, oh, I'm not sure this is for me, try the second one, because the first one was a lot. I feel like she wanted to be like, okay, this is how crazy this could potentially be, and this is stuff we're going to talk about, and this is how hard-hitting it can be. And it was like, okay, I got it. But the others weren't content-wise quite like that one. So, recommend the series. The final book that I read was Write, Publish, Repeat. I'm not going to talk too much about this because unless you're a writer, you probably don't care all that much. This is a great book. I gave it a 5 out of 5, and it talks about marketing and building an audience, and I really love these guys. They do a podcast. They are hilarious. Their voice really comes out in this book. And not only that, but the advice that they give is very mindset. It's very evergreen. It's very big things, like instead of focusing on your next book release, look at your whole author career. And that, you know, it takes a while to get skill, and you're not going to be perfect, and so many things that I think as an author I forget. So I love this book. If you are a writer or want to have a long-term writing career, I recommend this book. I recommend their podcast. They're amazing. I'm doing a full review, and I'm going to be doing I'm planning to do a video on like the top 5 books that I think every author should read. And this is going to be one of them. This is one that's on that list. It's a big chunky book. I'm telling you, if you want a writing career, this is worth getting the paperback for. I have took a highlighter to just everywhere. Just highlighter everywhere. So much, so good. That is all I have for you so far in the middle of July. It's been a good reading month. There were 2 books that maybe weren't so great, but everything else was very good. I'm happy, and I'm hoping the month continues. All right, guys, this is Jane. What have you read so far in July? Have you read any of these books? Do you have any comments, any thoughts? Should I continue with Children of the Whales? If I'm not loving it in the first one, will I love it as it continues? Will I have less trouble keeping track of who's who? Anybody else read Carnegie Hill? Did you have the same issues that I did, or should I have pushed through? Does Pepper come back to her senses? Let me know in the comments what you think. Also, my social media is below. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.